I always believed I was choosing wisely. I considered myself to be intelligent, if not fortunate. But now that I think about it, I'm amazed at how blind I was. And nobody warned me, not even my closest pals. But now, at 32, I'm sitting in my car in the neighborhood grocery store parking lot, shaking my head at the mess I've created. Yes, I have made some mistakes, but that's just my life, isn't it? My goal is not to please everyone. I used him. That's the problem. I didn't even realize I was using my husband until it was too late. Hello, my name is Melanie, I'm 32, and this is my tale. You don't have all the facts, but I know you'll criticize me. You have no idea how many times I sat there contemplating whether or not I had made the wrong decision in my life. Perhaps I ought to have waited. Perhaps I shouldn't have allowed the luxury and the things he could provide me to blind me. I promised that at the beginning I wasn't a gold digger. Ryan wasn't the wealthy, accomplished man you see today when I first met him. He was not a multi-billionaire real estate tycoon or anything. He was just a sweet construction worker with lofty aspirations. He was tall, good-looking, and a little rough-hewn. I really did like him. He had that I can make it mentality and that energy. I could see that he had great potential. I liked him for himself, or so I believed. I wasn't in it for the money. Actually, it was me who initiated contact. I asked him out since I didn't want to wait around, and I could see he liked me back. At first, it was fantastic when we clicked. However, life began to interfere, didn't it? We have 4 children. I recall the day of our first. I thought I had everything worked out, so I was ecstatic. While Ryan worked tirelessly, I stayed at home to look after the children. Except for one thing, everything was going well. His employment began to improve. His job went off, so forget about that. He began earning a lot of money, and I began to see things a little differently as his success increased. This home with marble floors and a huge backyard replaced a charming little house in a neighborhood that was out of our price range. To tell the truth, I began to enjoy it. I became quite fond of it. I didn't first consider it to be an issue. It was just the way things turned out, I told myself. I was here to support Ryan, who worked hard for his money, right? However, that's where I began to falter. I began to develop an addiction to the lifestyle, enjoying the upscale dining, shopping trips, vacations, and prestige. Who wouldn't, after all? If you didn't enjoy it, you wouldn't be human. It wasn't until it was too late that I realized how much I depended on it. And yeah, Ryan didn't have to point out that I was being pampered. I didn't care that he did, of course. I didn't want to hear him out. All he was saying was that I was spending too much. What was I to do, though? I've never been excellent at saving money. I'm present in the moment. The children were maturing, and I began to resemble Eve. Everything I had constructed was collapsing. Ryan was wealthy, to be sure, but we were always fighting. Something was always there. I'm not sure when it began, but sometime between the 4th child and the 5th year of marriage, I began to view Ryan as my ATM rather than as this affable, diligent man. At first, it wasn't conscious, but when you're living in luxury, it's simple to forget who put in the effort to acquire everything. And I did precisely that. Let me tell you, I felt terrible about forgetting about him, but I never expressed it. I didn't show him any of it. In my heart, I understood what I was doing, even though I was the ideal mother and wife. At the time, I didn't even feel like I was doing anything wrong, even though I was taking advantage of him. I desired more. I was always hoping for more. Every time he attempted to voice his worries or we got into a fight over money, I shot him down. In any case, what did he know about money management? The money was being spent by me. However, everything changed one night. It was just another argument, the same old nonsense. I was griping about not having enough time for myself and about constantly having to watch the kids when hubby was away on business. We were shouting at each other in the living room, and he was exhausted. Then it slipped. I have no idea how that happened, but it did. Everything seemed to freeze when I said to him, "I don't know why I married you. You didn't even have money when we met. I only stayed because you could give me what I wanted." It wasn't until he just stared at me in utter shock that I realized what I had said. I could see the pain in his eyes as his face turned pale. I felt no remorse at all, even though it felt like I had struck him with a ton of bricks. I didn't say I was sorry. Even the thought of doing it was too much for me. I had no intention of giving up. I knew I had gone too far when I noticed the expression in his eyes and the way he emotionally shut down. However, I was unsure of how to retract it. I'm stuck there now because I was too far gone and too deep in it. I have made my bed. I may have made a mistake, but I will not correct it. For that, it is too late. When I dropped the bomb on Ryan, he remained silent. He simply stood there looking at me as if he was trying to digest the situation and decide what in the world to do with someone like me. The silence felt oppressive. It was so dense. I was expecting him to yell or at least display some emotion, but he didn't. Without a word, he simply walked away. I recall standing in the center of the living room, still feeling nothing, when I heard his footsteps reverberate down the hallway and vanish into our bedroom. I assumed he would return and demand an explanation, start a fight, or do anything else. However, he chose to remain silent, which was far worse. It was all in that stillness. I felt like I was losing him and that I had no control over it. It wasn't until it began to go away that I realized how much I was taking him for granted. It wasn't until it was too late that I realized. Everything felt different the following day. It was quieter in the house. Ryan didn't bring up the argument, but he was aloof. Rather, it seemed as though he simply retreated entirely. I detested the fact that he wasn't the same with me. It annoyed me, but I also resented that I was no longer receiving what I wanted. Why he was acting as though I was the issue baffled me. Indeed, I did say a few things, but wasn't that justified? I got away with everything because of him. I wasn't out here racking up credit cards or anything, so it wasn't like I was asking for more money. But I was irritated by the way he began to treat me and emotionally distance himself. I began to reflect on how things had been in the beginning, when I was giving him everything. I gave him everything I had when we first met. I initiated contact. I worked hard. Why was he acting like I wasn't the one who helped him get to where he is now? Why did he act as though I had nothing to do with this? A week or so after that altercation, I recall one evening. The children and I were seated at the dinner table. You know, it was one of those awful dinners where nobody talks and you just pick at your food because everything seems to be clouded by a gigantic cloud. I was at my breaking point because Ryan was just sitting there and not talking. I lost my temper. The children fell silent, and I could see the expression in Ryan's eyes as I said, "You know, it's so typical of you to pull away like this when things get hard, always shutting me out. I don't even know why I put up with you. I could have had so much more." I could feel my heart pounding as his face tensed and he replied, "I'm just trying to protect what we have, Melanie, but you don't seem to care about that." Even though I felt bad, I wasn't going to acknowledge it. No, not with everything I'd worked for and everything I'd built. I was determined not to be the first to apologize. I refused to be the one to appear weak. However, following that, I began to shift in some way. The guilt began to seep in. At first, it was subtle, like a small voice in the back of my mind suggesting that perhaps I wasn't being fair. However, I choose to disregard it. I was upset, mad at myself for allowing things to get this bad, angry at him for not giving me what I wanted, so I continued to ignore it. I was furious. I was pushing him away, pushing everything positive away, and I wasn't even aware of it. The situation worsened during the following few days. I began to feel as though he was avoiding me as he began to leave for work earlier and stay later. I knew he was no longer coming home for me, even if he wasn't acting improperly. I could sense that he was not returning to the house that I had once made feel like home. I couldn't stop it from getting farther away. I kept telling myself that it was his fault, and that he would be grateful for everything I did for him if he would only pay me more attention. Although I felt in my heart that I was to blame, this wouldn't be occurring. I recognized myself. But I didn't want to deal with it. Not quite yet. But after a while, it began to irritate me. At night, I would lie awake and gaze at the ceiling, wondering what had gone wrong. I reflected on our first marriage, when we were so content and in love. Money, homes, automobiles, and vacations weren't important back then. We were the focus. However, it felt as though I was clinging to a life that I no longer even recognized. I began to doubt myself. Was money truly the only reason I was involved? Did I truly have the disposition to do that? The more I considered it, the more I realized that I had been taking advantage of him. Before, I didn't realize that I was taking advantage of him, and I wasn't even sad about it. Not yet, anyhow. I realize that sounds terrible, but I was in that situation, and I wasn't able to get myself out of it just yet. The following weekend, things reached a breaking point. For once, Ryan was at home on a Saturday. To be honest, I wasn't sure I was prepared to face what I'd done, but I thought, maybe we could chat and try to resolve the conflict. I still didn't want to tell him or even myself. He appeared to have not slept when he came downstairs in the morning. His weariness was evident to me. I could sense that he was carrying something heavy, and I knew that it was about me. He took a seat at the kitchen table, got his coffee, and remained silent. I would normally have struck up a conversation, but I was tired of acting. I didn't want to inquire about his day or seem as though nothing was wrong. We were silent for a few minutes before I remarked, "Ryan, we need to talk." He gave me a chilly look as he gazed up at me. I gulped hard, unsure of where to begin. About what? I didn't want to show my weakness, but I had a strange, rising sense that I needed to take action. I chose the emotional card right away, like I always do. Look, I've been thinking, and I think we both know what's been happening. I've been putting myself first, and I've been so focused on us and what we have, but I'm starting to feel like I've been taking it for granted, taking you for granted. Ryan's expression remained unchanged. I was even more irritated by his lack of expression. Why did he not respond? Why didn't he feel the anger I thought he would? The problem with Ryan, though, was that he was the type of person who didn't allow his feelings to control him. He would always be too cool. At last he replied, "It's not just about me, Melanie," in a steady but piercing voice. I didn't show it, but it really got to me. You can't keep using me for what I've built. You can't keep playing this game and expecting it to end well. Rather, I laughed, likely with more trepidation than I would ever acknowledge. I knew in my heart that he was correct when he said, "Come on, Ryan, I've been here for you, for us. You're acting like I'm some kind of gold digger." At first, I wasn't even aware that I was using him. However, somewhere along the line, I began to take everything for granted: the money, the lifestyle, the comfort of it all. It was nearly too late for me to realize it. "No, Melanie," Ryan stated icily. "Now you're using me for a life that you didn't build. I don't know when it started, but it's been going on for too long. It's not just about money, it's about respect." At that moment, he got to his feet, and I could feel the strain in his shoulders. He was finished. I had been avoiding it for months, but now he was displaying it. He remarked plainly, "You want a divorce, don't you?" His eyes were so keen that it seemed like he was looking right through me. It felt like a face slap. Unsure of what to say, I froze. The fact was that I was no longer certain, and I wanted to yell, "No! I didn't mean it like that. I was just frustrated." It was about everything I had and everything I still desired, not simply my frustration. My mouth opened to say something, anything, but the words refused to escape. The realization came to me suddenly. Ryan was now discussing the connection rather than just the disagreement. At last, I muttered, "You've already made up your mind, haven't you?" There was no need for Ryan to respond. He could have spoken, but his silence was more powerful. I realized then that I had pushed him too far because I could see the hurt in his eyes, voice, and every action. I was immobilized as I stood there. At last, the remorse began to seep in, but not yet enough to make me feel terrible. All I could think about was how the house, the money, and the cars were all coming apart. In that moment, everything began to feel pointless, but I wasn't prepared to acknowledge it, either to him or to myself. Then, however, he spoke once more, but in a softer tone, as if he were speaking to himself. "I didn't work this hard just to have you take it all for granted. All of my hard-earned money and everything I believed to be reliable suddenly began to crumble. I came to the realization that I had been putting up a front and behaving as though I had things together all along. In actuality, though, I was taking advantage of him, and I wasn't even telling myself this." Ryan added, "I'm not going to beg you to stay, Melanie," in a quiet but decisive tone. He said, "I'm done. I need someone who respects me," and turned to go. Just like that, no drama, no shouting. He simply abandoned me, leaving me to face the repercussions of my actions alone. I felt like crying. I wanted to tell him I was sorry and that I didn't want to offend him. However, the words failed to appear. The thing that bothers me now is that I was too proud. I never even had the opportunity to him to put things right. The ensuing silence was overwhelming, and as I stood there with everything I believed I desired, I came to the realization that perhaps, just possibly, I had lost everything. Although Ryan's choice to leave was definitive, it involved more than simply packing up his belongings and leaving the house. He ensured that everything was moving, severing connections in every manner. We didn't even attend counseling. No, let's work this out discussions took place. He simply filed, and within a few months, everything was established. No time wasted, no fighting. It ended, and I was ultimately left to pick up the fragments of a life that I had created using the labor of others. I was enraged. It was impossible for me to look at him without getting angry. How could he harm me like this? I gave him years of my life and 4 children. Surely he couldn't just leave like that. But he actually did that. The divorce process was completed swiftly, and Ryan refused to compromise on the payment. I received no alimony at all. He gave me nothing, not even half the house. The large house, the automobile, and the life I believed to be mine had to go. The worst thing? I had to work by myself. He made the stern, "you made your bed" decision without offering me any assistance, bridge loans, or other forms of support. I initially believed he was bluffing. Perhaps this was his method of forcing me to implore him to change his mind, or perhaps he simply wanted me to feel the hurt. But he was adamant and didn't see it as a game. The attorneys insisted that everything was legitimate and that Ryan had ensured his assets were safeguarded. There was nothing he owed me. To be honest, it was a blow to my pride that I couldn't even claim the children. The superior parent was Ryan. It was painful since he always made sure the children were taken care of and had them in mind, even when it came to their welfare. He did that even though he wasn't required to. He made sure I understood the cost of all the years I had been abusing him, rather than simply abandoning me with nothing. I was incredibly angry, frustrated, and furious. How did I end up in this situation? How could he walk away as if it were no great issue and I be left with nothing? But here I was, with nothing but my pride, no house, and no additional cash. And I couldn't get rid of the bitter taste in my mouth. I kept the severity of it a secret. I was unable to tell my friends the truth, that I was that lady who pretended to love them when, in reality, I don't know what true love is, because I was the one who took advantage of others. I wasn't prepared to acknowledge it, though. I remained as defensive as before. I didn't want anyone to notice how terribly I had messed up. I didn't think I was to blame. None of this would have occurred if Ryan had simply been more understanding and continued to give me what I wanted. But I knew the truth in my heart. I shouldn't have allowed it to progress this far. I ought to have valued him more. I was paying the price for not being the better wife and partner that I should have been. The anger hasn't really subsided when I reflect on it now. I don't believe I'm entirely to blame for what transpired. I know I made a mistake, but I still believe Ryan could have done more to make me happy. No matter how angry I get, I will never be able to regain what I lost. In actuality, Ryan emerged victorious. He received his life and got away with it. I had to handle the consequences of my own choices by myself. That's how it ended, no matter how much I try to convince myself otherwise. After Ryan departed, all I could think about was my sorrow and the harsh, cold fact that I needed him more than he needed me.